Good morning.
No, that's better.
Let's get ready to start. Can you guys hear me well without a microphone? Yeah. Perfect. So let's try it. If not, then we'll circulate the microphone around. Well, anyways, welcome. Good morning and welcome to everyone for joining us today. This is our first real estate symposium of 2021. We want to thank all of you guys for joining us. We want to thank our panelists for being here with us today. Can you guys hear me back there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Before starting, I do want to take the time to thank my partner, Kenneth Baboun, for an incredible job in putting this symposium together. Joanna and her team are responsible for every detail that you guys are enjoying today. And I don't know if you guys agree with me, I'm sure you do. She has done a phenomenal job. So let's give her and her team an incredible round of applause. Párate, Joanna, párate. So,
this is part right here, by the way.
no te tienes que ir tan atrás.
I'm too tall for the camera, since I take care of details, I don't want to. You see, those are details.
So we see a lot of new faces in the crowd, and we also see a lot of friends that have been supporting and participating in our symposiums since we started offering them last year. Last year was an incredible year for our series of symposiums. We had great speakers, and we also covered a wide array of subjects. For those of you guys that remember, we started our symposiums with Carlos Marin, who's not here today. We will hold it against him. Carlos Marin from the firm of Marin, Eljac, Lopez, and Martinez. He had an incredible series on corporate structures for foreign investors, and he updated all of our guests as well on PSA, Bank Secrecy Act, which is such an important subject, and other regulations that affect our business. We also had our very good friend here, Sara Yekoto, who is an international executive coach. And she held a very interesting segment on time management for busy professionals and entrepreneurs that are juggling usually 10 things at the same time, and they have to be in 5 different places at the same time. And she did a wonderful job, and it was a very high regarded event. For those of you who are here for the first time, our symposiums have 3 primary goals. This is what we try to offer, as BGI capital to all the participants. The first is we want to provide you with information, valuable information about our industry, about our market, about our profession. And today is not going to be any different. We have put a great panel together, and what better subject to get started with than to talk about all of the positives and challenges that we have going on in our city. The second goal is networking. If you look around the room, you're going to run into entrepreneurs, you're going to be with developers, there's a few bankers here, there's attorneys, realtors, CPAs. So we encourage you to not leave right away. Take time, go shake some hands, and meet some of the people that are really making things happen here in our city. The third goal is to do business together, right? For you guys to be able to spend time with each other, discuss opportunities, and see what you can do, see what we can do as a community. And just remember that if it has real estate behind it, BGI Capital wants to finance it. And that's the only shameless plug that I will do for our company is a whole event. So we start this year with why Miami? It seems to be the question on a lot of investors' minds. Our young city continues to evolve. Our Miami of today is definitely not the Miami of our parents. It's not the Miami of 20, 30, or 40 years ago. It's not the Miami of 10 years ago. Migration patterns are changing. Companies from other states in the US, Latin America, Europe, Asia are calling Miami their home, or they are at the very least establishing beachheads in our state, in our city. Last week at the CCIM conference, I learned about a new index. And this one I have to read because it's a very interesting index. It's called the U-Haul Index. The U-Haul Index calculates growth states by the net gain of one-way U-Haul trucks entering a state versus leaving that state during a calendar year. In 2019, Miami was ranked as number 1. We surpassed Texas. So that's a big accomplishment for our city. Let me fire off other interesting statistics about our city that I'm sure a lot of you guys know, or maybe it's in the back of your minds. The unemployment rate in Florida is 3.1%. It's below the national average, and it's actually at a record low for the state of Florida. Do you guys know what the unemployment rate is for Dade County? It's 2.7%. Florida is ranked as the number 2 state in the nation in fiscal stability. We have become the 3rd most populous state in the nation, with 20.3 million inhabitants. We passed New York as the 3rd most populous state. Dade County has 2.7 million inhabitants, and it's closely followed by Broward and West Palm Beach County. So you see the opportunities in the South Florida area. They're very interesting. Florida's GDP topped $1 trillion in 2019. Miami-Dade County accounts for 50% of our state's GDP. If Florida was a country, we would be ranked as the 17th largest economy in the world. And we are the 4th largest economy in the country. We do have our challenges, especially as we move to craft what we want our city to be in the next 10, 20, or 30 years. Some of the challenges that come to mind are educating our workforce for the jobs of tomorrow. We have challenges with infrastructure, and then we also have the challenges of climate change and how we're going to deal with its potential impacts. So without further ado, and to move into the discussion of why Miami, we have put this great panel together, and let me go ahead and introduce them. Right here to my right is Peggy Olin. Peggy is the president and CEO of One World Properties, a full-service real estate brokerage firm currently overseeing the sales and marketing of prestigious projects in South Florida, such as Paramount Miami World Center, Legacy Hotels and Residences, Paramount Fort Lauderdale Beach, 100 Las Olas, Yotel Pad Miami Beach, and Brickell 10. In the center, we have my good friend Lance Benson. Lance is an executive managing director at Newmark, Knight and Frank, with over 20 years of corporate real estate experience. Lance advises both local and national companies in developing and implementing strategic real estate plans, business strategy, consulting, emergency preparation, and real estate portfolio and transaction management. His formal education and experience in engineering provides his clients with a unique process-oriented, business-first approach to maximize the impact to their businesses. And last but not least, my partner, Kenneth Baboun, who I think requires no introduction, but I will anyway. Wait for it. As a result-oriented expert on high-end real estate development, Kenneth began his career in the Dominican Republic as CFO for a global clothing manufacturer. A native of Mexico, he relocated to Miami in 2003 and established a real estate development firm working on multi-million-dollar projects. In 2017, Kenny founded BGI Capital together with yours truly. As managing partner at BGI Capital, Kenneth oversees the real estate development and commercial aspects of BGI Capital. Kenny is recognized as one of South Florida Business Journal's top 40 under 40, an up-and-comer honoree for South Florida Business and Wealth. Furthermore, he is the 2005 recipient of the Visionary Award from the Developers and Builders Alliance in Miami, Florida. So let's give our panelists a round of applause, please. Now we'll. Ahora sí me siento. So let's start off with the questions. All of you come from somewhere else, another country, another state. What is your why Miami story?
I'll start.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you guys for putting this amazing group together and for everyone here who woke up early to have this good experience and meet so many new faces. I love doing these because I think it's such an intimate space to discuss what we love, right? We all live in this amazing place that sometimes we take for granted. I don't take it for granted because when I travel so much, I am traveling maybe a couple of weeks a year, a month, and every time I come home and I'm landing and saying, wow, we do live here. And this is why I love this city so much. I moved here from Peru in 1992. 94, a week before Andrew hit. And that was a good Miami story to begin with, because I was holding with a mattress the doors of my grandparents' house. And I had a kid from Lima that didn't speak any English, and I was here we don't even have rain in Lima, so it's like, what is happening? So that was the welcome Miami gave to me. But the best thing is, and I tell this my kids, it could only happen in the United States, that you can come from a complete different country with really barely speaking the language and having the opportunities that we have. And I think that for us, being in not only in the US, but being in Miami itself, having the multicultural ability to learn from so many different people, gets you to where you are today. I thought I was going to be a banker or a lawyer or something like that, and my parents told me I was going to be one day. But I ended up in real estate by complete accident. Another great Miami story of how you start in banking, which I started in banking, and then I ended up looking at a hot statement from somebody pretty well known in the industry, and me saying, how do I make that in less than a year? How can somebody make my yearly salary in one transaction? And the rest was history. So that's it.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be a part of Ocana with esteemed folks. I moved here oddly enough on a whim. Most people's stories are trying to get here. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I graduated from engineering school in '97. And I knew I wanted to get out of North Carolina, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go. And after taking an interview in Wisconsin and Pittsburgh and some other places, I knew I wasn't anywhere cold. And I was interviewing with a company that I ultimately worked for to get me down here called Johnson Controls. And they said, you're a top candidate for Florida. You can go wherever you want. And I said, well, I've never been to Miami, but I like warm weather. Why don't I go there? And literally on the whim, I moved here. And to me, it was the best decision of my life, aside from marrying my wife. And it was, to me, great. Very eye-opening, very different culture, but it's been a tremendous experience. I had the opportunity to work for Johnson Controls for 4 years, learning my way around the greater area. And similar to you, I was involved with some networking stuff, and I was like, who are those folks driving nicer cars and are wearing nicer suits? They're real estate brokers. And I was like, I don't know what they do and how did I get there? And so I made the transition to commercial real estate in 2001. So it's been great, and I'm very part of the why Miami is of my story. So.
Well, for me, just like most of Latin America throughout its cycles, I moved from Mexico in a political, economical turmoil type of scenario. I always knew I wanted to study in the U.S. I did move 1 year early to do high school here in Miami. It wasn't crazy about Miami first time I moved here. I guess I was too young for Miami. Miami's a little more of an adult's playground. I went to Boston, went to school, and I thought I was always going to continue in the family business, which was textiles. What does that have to do with real estate? What does it have to do with development? So I graduated from college. I go to the family business in Dominican Republic. And my father, out of nowhere, goes and says, hey, I invested in some real estate in Miami. Go check it out. I came here, saw the opportunities, saw the town, saw the transition, the master plan that was going to change, and I saw my future and picture here. And I still haven't left. So that's my wife's here in Miami.
You know, that's an interesting question, because not all, I mean, as you guys can see in the panel, everybody in the panel has a why Miami story. And I'm sure that as if we look at the audience, 90% of the people that are here have a why Miami story, whatever the reason is, right? I mean, Miami is a center of migration, and will continue to be. Let me ask you guys, Florida has become one of the most populous states in the country. And Miami is one of the primary beneficiaries of this migration. Where are they coming from? And how is this migration impacting your individual businesses?
Well, Florida is incredible. I mean, you see the number of the population, the growth, not only the people who live here, but the people who visit here. There's 68 million people alone that visit Disney World, to go to Orlando. If you think about that economic impact that we have in the city, it's enormous. As far as what Miami and the people who live here and who want to be here, they're from all over. I mean, I'm looking at our demographics and from our marketing side and what we're involved in. We have buyers from over 60 different countries. One of the beauties of, the people that are moving here, 27% of the people that live in South Florida are really native from South Florida. Everybody else is migrating from somewhere else. When we see the patterns of who buy in Miami in general, obviously South America has always been a huge driver, right? Obviously when we went through the migration of Venezuela, moving out, a lot of Venezuela was buying Miami. Brazil has always been a huge, huge buyer for us, regardless of their economic position and where they are in their cycle. But Latin America has always been Miami based. Miami's always been the charm of Latin America, the dream of having a second home there. But then also you have the European markets that we've seen come throughout the years. France, Italy, of course, the UK. All of those countries have always been represented. And then lately in the last 5-6 years, I've seen a lot more of like Turkey and Russia being represented here. Russia used to only buy downtown, the beaches, right? And Sunny Isles and all of that. The properties that we represent mostly are inward. We like to be more in the corridors of the urban corridors because we believe in the walkability factor on how people are going to be in the future and where would they like to live and for value. But that population, for example, Russia, all of a sudden Russia became my top 5 buyer in one of our biggest projects in downtown Miami that we have. So you see the shift is coming. And a lot of those people initially buy a place and say, it's going to be my investment. But they're always looking at it and saying, if anything happens in one of the countries that I'm living in, this is a good fallback position to be in. And that's what we see. But then most important, Miami has something that's incredible. South Florida in general. Out of the 1,000 people that are moving to Florida per day, I don't know if you guys know that number, 1,000 people per day. South Florida sees about 25 to 30% of that. And when I say South Florida, I'm doing the Tri-County area, not just Miami. But more important than not only from the abroad, but we also get the benefit of the other, either Northeast, California, or other Midwest countries that are states that are wanting to migrate to Florida for tax purposes. So we're getting both. Well, that's what I'm seeing who's buying and all of our properties now.
I'm probably a little more tuned into the sort of on the corporate level versus the investor buyer types, but I see folks looking for Miami for all over the world really, but the accessibility to Latin America is big for a lot of corporations. Obviously our tax benefit is very favorable here for corporations where people do business. If you need a multilingual workforce, there's probably no better place in America to have your business. And look, I really can't overlook the weather. I mean, it's never mentioned enough, but a lot of times in my shoes, when I'm working with a corporation and you find out that the CEO or the CFO or the executive staff, they have homes in the beach, they have homes in Coral Gables or in Broward County, they don't want to relocate their corporation somewhere else. They like the benefit of being out to do sports all year, to run, to do tennis, to do golf. It's a big attractant, and it's something that we see a lot of. As of late, you probably read in the media, there has been some hedge funds and some financial services companies that came here for the tax benefit. But we've seen that for a couple of years now, and we've seen a myriad of other organizations that look to come here or have a presence here. A large part of my business is the multinational companies that are headquartered somewhere else but needs their Latin American headquarters here, as opposed to having it in Dallas or Houston or even in Latin America because of the political environment here, because of accessibility. Talking to a client even just last week, the comment was made, we have to have the office in South Florida to be a signature office for us, because when we have folks coming up from South America and Central America, it needs to be a flagship office. But also, when we have our internal offices flying people to South America, it's cheaper to fly them to Miami and have everybody have Miami be the hub as opposed to Buenos Aires or Sao Paulo or somewhere else. So, I think we're covered in a bunch of different realms.
Well, on the finance side, we're always a little bit behind the curve. Obviously, when it comes to pre-construction, what we're closing is what was sold a couple of years back. We definitely, on the pre-construction side, we've seen a shift from certain countries of Latin America to others. Right now, Mexico is a strong buyer at this point. But what we've also seen on the finance side is that the same investor who came to buy the condo, like Peggy said, as a fallback, wants to do a business here, wants to find some other ventures. So now they're looking for income-producing properties. So we see that shift. That's not only an investment as such, but they also want a return on it. And then the other shift that we've seen, we have a lot of investors from all over the U.S. who no longer just want, again, their condo, their house. Those developers are making this their home, are making this a place where they want to, first, obviously, the tax benefits, but also to have their income established, to be established here. So we've seen that transition throughout. We get the tail end, but we see those shifts.
Peggy, as we see the migration patterns coming into South Florida, what neighborhoods are they targeting?
So it's interesting. I mean, it depends on it depends on what the ultimate goal is. But I think that for the people that we're basically seeing, they really want to be in neighborhoods that they can see an appreciation. When you're looking at Miami, you're looking at price per square foot of what we're doing in the city. An average price per square foot in the city, you're about $650 a square foot. Let's just say, if you compare that to where these people are coming from, where our buyers are coming, this is extremely inexpensive. Okay? So they're seeing Miami as a value play, and they're looking at a condo that for us maybe, wow, that's really expensive because we're in the city. People that are coming from abroad are saying, well, that seems reasonable to me given everything we have. So for us, obviously, I'm very vested in downtown Miami because we are doing some of the very important projects there now. But Miami Beach is always going to be a place where people are going to want to buy, especially when you're coming in from the Northeast. So a lot of the people that they're referring to as far as the hedge funds moving down or executives coming to look and establish residency and for their families, they're looking at areas like Miami Beach is a good area for people. Coral Gables is always a good area. They're looking for schools. They're looking for places where they can have, good restaurants and good accessibility. So those type of markets always play well. But then you also have, markets like Fort Lauderdale where you buy so much more for your money, and people are looking into Fort Lauderdale. When I live in Fort Lauderdale actually, and my kids go to it's a good story just so you can see the shift. My kids have been going they go to a private school there, and I remember going to when my son started. He's now in 10th grade. He was in 1st grade. You go up to the moms, the sign up sheet, and then you say, you see all the American names, right? And then my daughter, who's 6 years younger, for her first days, and you go into the class, and now you see, the last names. You definitely see Russia, a lot of Latin America. You see, and you're asking some of this class, the people in the class, like, well, we used to live in Miami, but we're coming up to Fort Lauderdale because we buy so much more. We buy the big house on the water. $3 million in Fort Lauderdale buys you a lot more than it buys you in Miami. So, and price per square foot always makes a thing. So I think markets like that, where there's still room for growth, especially in the waterfront areas. Waterfront is it's a big driver for people in general.
Lance, there has been some very high-profile announcements of companies moving from the Northeast to South Florida. Most recently, Carl Icahn announced that he was moving his operations from New York to Miami. David Tepper, whose Appaloosa Management hedge fund already calls South Beach home. Can you give us more granular information as to how material this business migration is, and if it's having a quantifiable effect on your business?
I mean, look, I would say, Robert, that we've had for several years, particularly since some of the tax codes have changed in the Northeast regarding hedge funds and those type of financial institutions, a myriad of different folks move down here. I think, look, we've had a number of them. Some of the headlines sound bigger than the actual impact to actual employees, because you take a skeleton crew of executives and you set up an office here, where you still may have large-scale operations in the Northeast, but here's your home. But that withstanding, we've still had a lot of growth of companies around the board. And if you look at things like the commitment to Spirit Airlines to reaffirm their commitment to South Florida, to build a headquarters in Dania, Burger King recommitting their headquarters here about a year ago or a year and a half ago to stay in South Florida. I mean, to me, those are ones that are really driving the large-scale employment here, employing many folks at once. And I think that's the real storyline here, and which is really exciting about South Florida. But you can never look the fact that we have, Carnival, Norwegian, we have Royal Caribbean, Heiko, Burger King, Spirit we mentioned, not too far off, Office Depot. I mean, there's a myriad of corporations that have called their home here.
Kenny, on the commercial real estate lending side of the business, are you noticing a change on origin of borrowers and asset types that they're purchasing?
Definitely. As I said, while we're looking in the market, the shift in international buyers has changed. We have huge developments coming from Mexico, for example. We have Agave Holdings doing a huge project in Coral Gables. Nobody has had, except Alan Morris, the mission to build something so big in such a long time. We're also seeing a lot of local value-added plays. We're recently financing Coral Gables, an office building. The value-added play on that was refurbish the building. It already has stabilized office on top, but they're still going with the co-working space, which, well, right now some people are saying, oh no, co-working because of WeWork. But no, it's a very good proven model, unless you have crazy CEOs like that one who are just spending every one of those money like that. It's a proven concept. So we're seeing that, and also on the hospitality side, Miami, we are still getting a lot of influx, a lot of people visiting, and there's not enough rooms. We recently also did a hotel in Biscayne and 40th for a Holiday Inn. which is being under construction, and there's still not enough demand. So definitely commercial, office, hotels, which were stuck for a while, are the primary focus of investment at this point. And needless to say, I don't know if you noticed so many buildings pop up that have no names that were done for multifamily. So there's clearly a big demand for multifamily as well.
I'd also add, like, we've seen quite a few in the retail world as well. The Wynwood, Brickell expansion of retail players wanted to be here and to capitalize on the density that we have, particularly on the east side of town.
Yeah, agreed.
Let me actually piggyback off of Kenny's response. He mentioned the project that Agavi is developing in downtown Miami. We also have 830 Brickell.
Actually, the Gavi project's in Coral Gables.
In Coral Gables, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. 830 Brickell is in the process of being developed, and if you just take those two projects, there's over 1.2 billion square feet of office space coming into the market in the next few years. How is that going to affect your business? Do we have the demand to fulfill that spot in a reasonably amount of time?
I mean, look, I think it's beneficial for the overall market because we really haven't had a number of significant developments in Coral Gables or the Brickell area. It'll be interesting to see because we had Brickell City Center office building that wasn't on Brickell Avenue, but part of Brickell. But the reality is there were two buildings that were smaller, and one of the buildings got pre-leased by Ackerman. So, and the second one got in large part leased by WeWork. So we haven't had a lot of large-scale developments, and it not actually being on Brickell, it's off of Brickell. It'll be interesting to see, but the reality is if WeWork continues their lease there at 160,000 feet, they only have about 300 remaining to lease. Agavi Holdings, our firm represented a large financial institution in Coral Gables that's relocating to one of their buildings. It's going to take the majority of that building, and I think they'll be wildly successful with the other ones, to be honest with you. So it's needed. I mean, the rents have increased in both markets substantially. In Brickell more than Coral Gables, but I think it'll give a nice balance to the market and give some breathing room, because what happens is as markets get tighter and we don't have the development, because some of the development sites get built up for residential or other reasons, tenants that really need to expand become kind of landlocked in their buildings. So it puts them in a position where they have to take space on non-contiguous floors, and when the new building gets built, it offers them the opportunity now to be contiguous, to be right-sized, to bring in, for example, new workplace standards into their build-out. So I'm looking forward to it, Robert, to be honest with you. I think it's positive for our markets. We've had some development, for example, in the airport markets and other areas that are large corporate markets for us, and the buildings have done well. With that being said, I mean, if you guys invest in office buildings, it takes some time to lease up. It's not always a one-year process. I mean, usually it's a 3 to 5 year process of sorts to get buildings leased up.
But just to add to that, that's from the commercial side. But then let's look at the impact that a Brickell City Center that you're talking is, 5 million square feet of mixed use, 5-point-something million square feet of mixed use. What it did not only to Brickell City Center and from the residential standpoint of what they sold, but think about like related, right? They brought to market all those buildings around, like the SLS, the SLX Lux, ourselves, we did a building just by there, Brickell 10. All of those, there's the amount of the sales that were produced because that was coming into that area. It's huge. Now let's move a little bit north in the corridor, which is downtown Miami. The Miami World Center, which I'm very proudly involved in. That's the second largest urban development in the United States. I mean, that is 17 million square feet of mixed-use development. It is enormous. We don't realize that because we're seeing it come up in pieces. And the reason why we're seeing it come up in pieces is because going back to the speculation days of, today, cash is king. You don't have no money to build. It's impossible to get things off the ground. There's no such thing as a pre-construction era of like you have to wait before a building gets to a certain threshold to be able to be built. Today, I can't sell a building unless I can tell the buyer that building is coming off the ground. And thankfully, I've been involved in projects that have been able to do that. But that's why you don't see the over amount of building, because when you're sitting with a developer and he sits with me and says, Peggy, I really have this great piece of land, but I have to be able to be sold 40, 50% before I break ground. I'm going to say to him, if you're not coming out to market ready with deep pockets in order to pay commissions to brokers and really have a marketing budget that's strong enough to support this project, forget it. Actually, just don't even try it, because it's not worth it. So what's going to happen in Miami World Center and the impact that that's going to bring. We did the Paramount Miami World Center. The tower that you probably see is getting lit up right now. It is probably one of the most spectacular projects I've ever seen inside. The amount of money that has gone into that development and the announcements that are going to come on the retail side. Heinz is doing a building which is, top tier commercial builder that they do AAA office buildings around the country. I was in Hong Kong with the woman that leads up their division in Asia, and she was sharing with me some of the interesting things they were trying to do in this building. But that's coming, this upcoming year. Marriott is building their largest convention center hotel, bigger than Miami Beach, on that site. Now think about the impact that's coming from the airport, connectivity to the Bright Line, connectivity to Orlando, and the port. So just that corridor of downtown Miami. Because that's happening, we launched the project last year called Yotel Pad. In Yotel, we launched it I think we started with contracts in April. Within a year, we were sold out of 280 units. That doesn't happen. That hasn't happened. But that happened because I was able to say, look what's coming 2 blocks down the street, right? And people believe in that infrastructure. They want to be able to invest in places that they can believe in, and they can see that there's still room to appreciate and appreciation and growth. Right? So.
Well, I think what's exciting about it is you're going to see some new communities, if you will, created in Miami, because that's an area where historically had not had people live or work or go and visit for outside of work activities. It's going to be changed, and I think if you look forward 5 years, kind of like what happened in Atlanta between Buckhead and downtown, became a midtown Atlanta. It's going to be the same sort of thing. You're going to have a new community, very exciting, with all the amenities that's going to attract people. 20 years ago when I moved to Brickell, you wouldn't go past where Perry Cones is or the firehouse used to be. Now, there's where you really want to be, and it changes a lot of dynamics, even for your office space. Some people would say, hey, I want to be on the edge of Brickell at 1450 because I can get in and out easier, but then you're far away from all the walking amenities. So there's going to be a lot of changes in dynamic, how people look at this walkability factor and the amenities that come along with the new construction concepts.
When you look at that development that's taking place in downtown Miami, obviously the infrastructure is important, right? In terms of having the right public schools and private schools in the area. Are you seeing that movement as well?
I haven't seen, I've seen it in charter schools and in some sort of private schools happening around downtown. Like, for example, my kids play soccer in downtown for Juventus. So I'm meeting a lot of folks that actually live north of where I live. They live closer to Wynwood, to Miami Shores, Bay Point, and those areas. And a lot of the kids go to school in private charter schools that are in the area. I think, as we look at these communities and look at these areas, one of the things the city have to be mindful of is how do we put the infrastructure there to get people there with public transportation? How do we put schools there? And one of my big things is how to get parks and recreation. Because these things can't be afterthoughts, because once you build up too much, you don't have anywhere for parks. And we need places for people to jog, run, exercise, kids to play sports and those kind of things. So I think we're getting there, but we have to keep a mindful eye on it, if you will.
Well, actually, just to add to that, the city has done a tremendous job in that corridor that I'm looking at and I'm seeing from anything. If you walked by Bayside, and obviously if you've done the whole walk from Bayside all the way to the Adrian Arts, and then what's coming on the underline and the paths that they're trying to do for bikes, so they're trying to be very active on that. Furthermore, Miami World Center had a restriction to build 12-foot sidewalks with trees and in order to allow this walkability, thinking from the Brightline connectivity, people getting off the train and just walking. But also there is a huge plaza that's coming right in the middle of downtown that they're not going to be able, it's meant for public use. So the city, I know, has a lot of commitment. I don't know how many of you know all the free entertainment and like classes and fitness classes that happen at Bayfront Park, for example. None of us think about it because some of us are really busy, but there's really a lot of those type of initiatives that I'm really, really happy to see from the city standpoint, because they see more people, migrating and saying, my kids are going to college. I have my big house on Pinecrest. I have my big house in Coral Gables. What am I doing with this big house? I'm going to sell this and I'm going to move in. I'm going to move in because I don't want to be driving, right? And I think having the ability that the city is really the awareness of that, it's really helping. It helps us from our sales process to attract more end users.
That 395 bridge redoing.
That's right.
That's going to be a great asset to your property.
There's a huge park coming there too.
Underneath it, yeah. It's going to be pretty cool.
Kenny, from a lender standpoint, what are some of the best areas and opportunities for lending that you're seeing in Miami?
Okay, from a lending standpoint, the areas that we're seeing a lot of development. We are basically in the point where downtown is an area that's being overlooked, and people are, it's filled out to happen. You guys took control of everything, Peggy. You guys have everything in downtown. Where we're seeing the opportunities is the remaining areas in between. Wynwood's already developed, Design District is right there. Where we're seeing a great growth would be probably for financing would be towards Magic City, towards Alapata. These are the up and coming areas that people are assembling land and looking at more long-term projects. So that's where we see the future in lending. We're seeing a lot of land deals being done. And those developments are, Magic City is huge what's happening over there, and it's already a reality. So those are the main focus in Miami.
Building on that a little, and I'll put this out to the panel, opportunity zones, there's a lot of talk about opportunity zones. Are you guys, how is it impacting your business? Are you guys involved in it? Are you guys seeing it? Does it impact your underwriting, Kenny, when you decide to go alone on an opportunity zone transaction?
As of now, we're not taking into consideration for lending the opportunity zone factor. I think that some prices are being driven up because it's an opportunity zone, but on an underwriting perspective, we're still taking a conservative approach that it works as such as a project. So now for underwriting right now and for valuation, we're still being conservative around it. We don't see the benefit till 10 years after. So we cannot underwrite a loan today for a 10-year hold.
I see it less on my end. There's other areas designated like enterprise zones and stuff that allow for potential tax breaks if the company is new to market or company's adding jobs at a certain pay level. It's a little different, but less on the opportunity zone side.
Well, I see it from the stand that people are, buying up land for future development, and they come and we sit down and look and analyze and see what can we do, what can we build. So it allows for more. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that coming in the next year because people right now are just analyzing and seeing what they can build. Today hasn't really affected what I'm doing at this moment.
So Forbes magazine, 2019 ranking of the best states for business puts Florida as number 5 in the nation. It actually climbed a couple of spots from number 7 in 2018. Labor supply is an important category and takes into account workforce with college and high school attainment among other factors. In your opinion, how deep or shallow is our talent pool? Are you seeing a deepening of the talent pool from migration to South Florida?
I'll speak first. I feel like, look, we have a good opportunity and we do a good job of attracting talent from across the country. And for example, just in my 3-person team at Newmark, that we kind of work and focus on the same type of business together. We're all 3 non-natives. We're all coming from somewhere else, New York, Canada, and myself from North Carolina. But I think there's particularly at the upper levels of employment, attorneys, medical folks, different types of jobs. We are attracting folks to come here. I think labor is a challenge probably throughout the United States right now because we are in a time of economic boom, and it's always challenging in those kind of times to find good labor. I think we do have to work on certain things with affordable housing, transportation, so that way we're able to have a more depth of employment across the whole spectrum, not just sort of professional, but in all areas. But I think, generally speaking, I think at least what I'm hearing from employers, everybody always says, look, good employees are hard to get and hard to keep, but I think we do a pretty good job of attracting them to South Florida.
Definitely, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge for the larger corporations. So I think what's happening is that the cost of bringing in quality people, and they're just bringing them from other places. So companies are relocating, doing incredible incentive packages for their employees because they just can't find them here. And the reason why they can't find them here is that, if you're really looking at our system or our higher education, right? I mean, look at the University of Florida. I mean, it's ranked in the top 10 schools in the country. That is an incredible school, really difficult to get in right now. The kids that are coming out of the University of Florida, and the only why I know that is because my daughter just graduated from the University of Florida, but, so I can see the competitiveness of what comes out of there. Most of the kids really are looking to say, well, Florida doesn't have right now the type of jobs or the amount of jobs that can employ me, so I'm going to go find another opportunity. I'm going to learn somewhere else, and then I'll come back because I definitely want to live in Florida. I'm not going to go live in New York or San Francisco or the rest of my life. So they're looking. Kids are leaving, and they're really thinking they're going to be coming back. And I think that they're waiting for that growth to happen. That's our internal people that we're living here. Then you have the companies that are moving in that cannot recruit those, enough of the pool talent that have to bring in their own people. But then also the talk is not only attracting them, but also retaining is the biggest challenge right now. How do I retain the employee that I just brought? Because a lot of these people are bringing people, they're very talented, they're being looked at by other companies, and the other companies are making them, offers they can't refuse. So they're losing talent. So it's really more about retaining what they're bringing. But it's definitely a challenge that, I think that the state is very aware. But as we go in this mode of attracting some of these larger companies, I think the ability for talent to stay in South Florida is going to continue to increase. But currently it's a challenge.
Kenny, you want to?
Well, the way we've been seeing it is, okay, we have record unemployment in Florida. We have a housing problem, as many condos that we can build that are extremely expensive, as many houses that we have. We don't have affordable housing for them. Entry jobs, which is what we're looking for, the workforce that you're looking for, it's not affordable for them to be here. Definitely there has to be a bigger synergy between government and the companies to train, to facilitate them, to be able to make it easy for them to start off here. It's tough, like you said, your daughter's looking at other areas first and then coming back here. To start here from the get-go is difficult, so that's the gap we have to reach.
I was
going to say, like, the one thing I will say is, like, if you're not from here, I feel like you're more open to being in an area that is probably more urban and maybe more affordable. Like when I first moved to Brickell, I lived in an affordable place of sorts. Not that every place is affordable in Brickell by any means, but there's stuff that went west of Brickell. I think there's it's not a stigma, but like if you grew up here and your parents are in Pinecrest, you grew up in Pinecrest, it's a lot tougher to say, I'm going to give up the Pinecrest life to come to live in an urban area because you're not used to doing, without a car or Uber everywhere. So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting to hear the elements of the affordable housing or not, because I think the people that are here, if you live in West Kendall and you grew up in West Kendall, you kind of have the worst scenario if you're not willing to move out of West Kendall, because then you're stuck in traffic. That becomes then your only affordable option instead of looking east. in Little Havana and those other areas.
But even Havana and those areas that we've looked into constantly, we see all the multifamily deals that come through us. The projected rents are probably 5% deviation from the somewhat affordable product, a little bit west of Brickell, a little bit towards the river. Rents are not that much cheaper around it. It's still not. Yes, it may be. I get the stigma from people that are from here. I'm not from here. I've been here most of my life, but really, I'm surprised with the rents that people are getting. Less than a mile away from here, and they're not that far away from a mid product here, whether it's Brickell, downtown. Midtown, I just can't compute that some rents in Midtown are more expensive than in the heart of Brickell. The numbers are still not there for affordable the way I see it for that urban core that we built.
Yeah.
I want to turn the questions over to our guest, but before doing so, I want to ask you guys one more question. And the question is, how do we keep the why in Why Miami? What do you envision, or how would you like to see Miami evolve over the next 20, 30 years? Peggy?
I think Miami, again, it goes back to Miami is so diverse. I always like to call Miami, we have offices in Asia and traveling back and forth to China and really seeing the differences, I see, and the similarities for some things. I always say Miami is like, it's very similar to Hong Kong in a way, where you have the gateway to Latin America, to Europe. You have the diversity of people. You have the financial institutions. You have the consulates. That you can think that this is a perfect hub to grow an incredible city. And that's why I see so much potential for Miami. One of the things that I think for Miami that I think it lacks is that civic engagement. And the civic engagement is because, again, we're only 27% of the people who live here, they're from here. So the attachment sometimes is not to the city itself, so it's a lack of engagement. So for me, one of the things that will continue to make Miami great is really having the current leaders of Miami and the current, having engage the younger generations to have that pride of ownership of their city, and really plant that civic engagement and trying to really get involved with initiatives in the city to just continue making the city great. I used to travel 10 years ago in the middle of the crisis when I opened the company. I opened my company in 2008 in the middle of the real estate crisis. And I used to travel pitching why Miami is a place to live. And I used to pitch things like, one day we're going to have the Adrian Arts Center, one day we're going to have the Brightland, one day we're going to have this. Today, that's all a reality. It's going to take time. But I think that really trying to empower our younger generations to really be involved, it's a big thing that Miami needs.
What I'd like to see, I hope, and we got, I think, the very forefront of it is looking at infrastructure, parks and recreation, and things to improve the lifestyle of Miami, which also includes schools. I think number one, there's got to be massive investments made in transportation, and what they're doing at 395 Exchange, I think, is good. I think what they did at the 836 and 826 to alleviate people who are making that commute. But at the next level is we got to look at train and rail service going from west to east, because that's a real problem. When you look at a lot of the workforce, housing, and issues, it's the commute that kills people. I have folks in my office that drive 2 hours a day because they live in West Kendall to get to Brickell. How can we eliminate that? I think, the underlying and some of the other park things are good, but I think the next level is the city has to put money in, work with developers to buy real land and assemble real parcels of land and make real parks. Because of my kids' sports, I spend time in Doral. I can tell you the city of Doral and Mayor Bermudez has done a fantastic job of laying down beautiful, wonderful, user-friendly parks that people can park and people can enjoy. The city of Miami has got to do the same thing. And it's not cheap because we're talking about urban land in a very expensive area, but that's got to be done. And obviously schools. So we can get schools, get people moving, get people outdoors. I think it's going to really continue to make Miami great. And the development and everything else is just going to funnel with it and continue to. So.
Okay, I see it a little bit in a different way. I came here when Miami was a town. It was really just a town. Now it's a world-class city. I feel myself, I am engaged with my community. I feel proud to be a Miamian now at this point. I've seen it develop. We have sports. We finally got art. We have the biggest fair, Art Basel. If you want basketball, if you want soccer coming in, the development cities there, we have growing pains. I think we're addressing them a little slow, but I think they're being addressed. There's still many big projects that are gonna incorporate the city into what a huge city like New York is. We have already many different pockets that are their own cities. Like in Brickell, I've been in Brickell for 20 years. If I wanted to go for a drink, I had to go to South Beach. If I wanted to go to a nice restaurant, Gables. Whoever lives in Brickell doesn't live Brickell now. Whoever lives in the Wingwood Design District doesn't live that area. Those pockets, now that the downtown is being developed, no one's gonna leave your area. You're building everything for everyone over there, but no one's really gonna go as connected as we are. I think we're on the right track. Yes, we need a little bit more infrastructure to support it, to be that growth, that master plan that we have to be responsible about the services that you're giving it. But I think we're completely in the right track, and we've already skipped from me living in the town to living in one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world right now.
So let's open it up to the audience for questions.
I like to add on to, by the way, my name is Mauricio Bejar. I work with Habitat Group. We are a real estate development company here west of Brickell. We're building 300 units. It's 100 hotel rooms, 100 condos, and 100 multifamily, among other hotels, all in the West Brickell area that Kenny and Robert are very familiar with. Another important factor that we didn't mention is the fact that we have the Port of Miami, and the expansion of the Panama Canal has brought us 1 million square footage of warehousing by the Doral area. Looking at the freight coming in and out of the United States to the southeast and down to South America, I can guarantee you that the grapes or the strawberries you're eating now, they're not coming from California, they're probably coming from South America. So that is another important point of the growth that we have for the next many years to come on the trade. That is another big factor that we didn't take into account when we mentioned all of the events and all the factors that are taking place in Miami. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Questions?
If the panel can just touch on how you see global warming and the sea level affecting your industries, and how you see that in the future and where we're going with the sea level rise.
Well, there's definitely a concern that comes up, right? People talk about it all the time. I think it's important for all of us to be conscious. I think the city is doing everything they can, and they're putting a lot of money aside. And I mean, look at Miami Beach, right? You constantly see Miami Beach. You know, they're trying to lift the streets. It's inevitable. It's here, and we have to deal with it. I mean, you better hope that cities like Miami and the government it's putting really measures to learn from other places that are experiencing the same type of challenges, and use some great engineering to figure this out. But something's got to happen. I mean, I personally live also on the water. I mean, you know, we have to raise our seawalls, right? People that live on the water, you have to raise your seawalls by a certain date, and you have a certain amount of time that you have to do that with. Otherwise, you're going to get penalties. So all of those things are starting to happen. So we're seeing it. It's going to definitely it's here.
It's a complicated question, right? That's the bottom line. It's complicated.
But this would affect the prices of the property.
Currently, I don't see it. I personally have not seen anybody say, I'm going to pay less because you live in East Miami. That's not happening yet. If it's going to happen in 20 years, depending on how really the global warming is going to affect us, that's yet to be seen. Hopefully not.
It's kind of interesting. If you live on the water, I live on the water, and you live on the water. It happens if you all live in the water. And I still think people come to. I mean, for me, I'm a big believer in being on the water, having a water view. You know, I do believe the city has done some initial studies and has an action plan to address how the city's going to handle it. And some of it, I think, is infrastructure type stuff regarding pumping and those sort of things. But, will it affect the office market? I don't know when or how it would in the near term. We'll have to see how it plays out in the long term, I think.
Don't forget flood insurance.
Well, that's what I was going to say, actually. How is the insurance world affecting you guys, particularly I see in the residential and the space and commercial side? Do you see that changing in your business dramatically? And what is it that you need to differentiate from what you need from your brokers, from your insurance partnerships to excel?
As of now, as a lender, once we deal with the flood insurance, as of now, we haven't seen a change. So we haven't seen a change, and we haven't affected the developers, because we put the rules because we're going to be lending to their, whether it's development, whether it's the tenants, whatever it is, that hasn't changed. I do believe that that's a little bit responsible. At some point, there should be some pressure for people to be a little more conscious. But every new development is taking at least into consideration what are my measurements to at least my project to be safe. Houses in the waters that we're building in the 50s, 60s, I mean, at some point they need to be leveled off and raise the wall. I mean, that's all they can do. If I'm not mistaken, the city of Miami Beach was doing also, I don't know if it was $500 million that they put aside for pumps and for building
Like infrastructure stuff, pumps and
for that.
Well,
That's just reactive. Where you guys are going with the question is proactive, and I think it's more on a macro level. It's out of hands. We can only just prevent our investments from getting affected in the short term. Long term, nobody knows.
From existing product is different from the new product, right? So all the things that we're involved is new construction. So new construction developers have new codes, right, to obey. But other developments, like if you're looking at value at plays, and you're looking at cities like Miami Beach, if you're under a certain height, right, your insurance is much higher, and therefore it prevents, anybody who may be looking for an add value at play to really go forward with that deal. Right? And then that's the only thing that I've seen, but it hasn't really affected me.
Yeah, in fact, a friend and a fellow board member at our condo is here with us, and our insurance premiums have only went up minusculely every year at our condominium. Seems to be a higher sensitivity to the amount of hurricanes that affect the state than it does, at this point at least, flooding from global warming.
I wanted to add something that I've seen a shift and a change in Miami as far as the younger crowd. I've been doing real estate for like around 9 years, and I was a banker before. And I had rentals that from clients that bought duplex and fourplex and small multi-residential. And these younger people have come to me and they have approached me that they want to buy a home. Because I was a lender, I'm able to give him advice, and also I'm able to go through the process. You have to go ahead and fix your credit. And it's incredible the availability that now you have in credit that you didn't have before. And now you get financing when a person has gone bankrupt. These younger people that have student loans, they found it difficult, prior to that because they made a mistake or they stopped paying it. But there's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of lending out there. And another shift that I see is that the young professional now that has a family is willing to move in Alapata. Many years ago, they weren't willing to do that. They want to buy in Little Havana. They're willing to go in neighborhoods that they're transforming into gentrification. And that's a big shift out there, I think that with the proper guidance, and many agents don't realize that there's opportunity. You find an investor that buys a property in certain area. I have an investor that I sold 2 land. They're building on unincorporated Miami-Dade on 27 close to Alapata, another in Wynwood. So I actually convinced, I'm into affordable and into younger people buying. I was born in Miami. And I convinced my investor, I said, you know what, you can sell this property very quickly. Just give them FHA financing. So she said, really? And I go, yes. Not only did you buy an opportunity zone, but you can give younger people an opportunity to buy. She goes, I'm all in. So there is opportunity to buy up there. I just think that we need to educate, the younger community, the availability that there is, and also the lending out there.
That's a good point.
A very good point. Do we have any, please?
Yes, great insight from the panel, and I work with Lance, and I'm in the retail division of Newmark. I want you guys to address, there's a lot of upward pressure on retail prices, and we have a lot of disposable income. In Brickell, for example, 35 is the average age, 127,000 average household income. But with that, we pay about 40% of that income in housing, very high percentage. How do you think we keep our retail healthy? We're bringing a lot more retail to the market, but how do we keep this entrepreneurial spirit, the young guys that want to come in, start a business, but afford rents? In Miami general, but more important, the city center, the world center, and Brickell.
I mean, my own opinion is when projects are developed for retail only, it's hard to get around lower rents because the rents are supporting the price of the entire retail, right?
Correct.
However, if retail is a portion of a greater property where a developer can still retain return because he's got multifamily housing, he's got office, and retail is looked at more as an amenity, then, I believe at least it should give an opportunity for somebody to have less return on the retail, and still maintain a desirable return in the entire project. So that way you can, have the retail that you're talking about. And I think as you look at all these projects that are going up, there's going to be more of a retail element, or the ability in the future to put a retail element. Because as things move west, move north, people want to open up shops and restaurants and those sort of things.
Well, on the finance side, the retail side, we've seen a very big decline. We have seen it. I guess it's a little bit driven by the concept that we're seeing working, basically the Amazon-proof concept that we're working. High retail rents are justified when you have the density and not only the sustainability of a project, because you have the development top, but you need the core for it to be fed off. So like Lance said, just a standard retail doesn't really make sense unless that's service retail. Service retails the rents are on the climb, while commercial retail is on the decline. That's our trend that we're seeing.
I mean, look, being involved in the downtown area, and of course, I totally agree with the poor comment as far as all the economic impact. That also brings 7 million passengers or so a year, right? You're talking about an enormous amount of people that are going to be having this walkability factor of going into areas like downtown and jumping on the Metro Mover, being able to come to Brickell City Center and utilizing all that. I think that retailers are not only looking for the areas that people are residing and the residents of that immediate area to be the spenders. I think those residents are more into the community aspect driven coffee shops, gyms, nail places, all those things. The actual stores are more counting onto this visitors that are really coming in and experiencing this area from the shopping perspective. But also you have, the younger demographics and the younger, they're looking really into the sharing economy is huge. I mean, this is why, Uber is so successful. We're looking at housing and we're talking about things in like 10 years from now. Obviously, everybody talks about micro development and smaller units. If you're looking at, it's funny, when you go to simple things like if you're in New York and people are having an apartment in New York, most people don't invite you to their home for dinner because they live in a very small place. So everybody's using the restaurants around. And this is what's going to happen when we're looking at these downtown areas. The restaurants and the ability that people are going to be able to live on a one bedroom that's 500 square feet and be comfortable, or have a roommates that have, a 2 bedroom and 700 square feet and be able to afford a rent. And you're right, 40% of your income to go into rent is huge. But that's the reality we're seeing in all major cities in the United States, not just Miami, just to make that a point. And if you want to have that type of lifestyle where you're not spending money on gas, commuting, your time, which is the most precious asset that people really in this generation looking into, and the consideration of time, people are willing to sacrifice some of those luxuries, especially the younger generations, to be able to live in an area where they can have the walkability.
I think also you need, the retailer's got to have an opportunity to make more money, right, in terms of operation. The days of having a lunch business and making the rent for Brickell's probably over. I would think that you would probably agree. So you got to go make money at lunch, at dinner, at takeout, a lot of takeout, and more takeout. You know.
Uber Eats.
Uber Eats.
We do it all the time in our family.
What I understand now is they want to build in New York. Is that
No, well, I was just referring to
because what they're
the
doing is
downtown.
people over 65. You are talking about young people. Yes, they're fine. But what do you do with people who are over 65? Where they are going?
Right, well, it depends, right? So I was just referring to the younger demographic in the downtown area. People that are older, they want different things. They want to have more space. They don't like to be crowded. They don't like to have, so they're moving into other areas, maybe northern Florida or more in the western suburbs. They stay in the Coral Gables area where they have also the walkability, but it's not as dense. That's my experience on doing that. But you'd be surprised. Let's just refer to a project that we're involved in that's in downtown Fort Lauderdale, for example, 100 Las Olas. The demographic there is basically couples that are in their 60s who don't want to be living in the western suburbs of Broward County, but want the walkability, but not necessarily the Miami crowdness. So they find Fort Lauderdale to be a perfect fit for them because of that factor. So it just depends. And there, you don't have small units. You do have the 2-bedroom and a den, 1,800 square foot units where your grandchildren can come and visit, your son can come and visit. So it's a very different play. I don't think the urban corridor of downtown Miami in general, it's for that specific demographic. I don't think they're looking for that.
And just to piggyback off of that, I mean, what you're seeing in the suburbs as well, it's the conversion of the assets. If you go south and you go to the Falls, the Falls, we just lost Bloomingdale's as a tenant, but what they're starting to offer now is more of a lifestyle destination, right? They've opened a bunch of new restaurants, Booyah's going in there, and a bunch of concepts are going in there, and they're repurposing these properties so that the people that are in the suburbs also have some of these alternatives.
Yeah, but I think his question's a complicated one because somebody over 60 that can afford to be in Key Biscayne, their view of where they want to live might be very different than somebody who's living off of Social Security,
Downtown Development Authority has great statistics on the downtown area, the urbanism, and the millenniums that we have. It's a high number, and that's what they're looking for. You guys are riding the Muppets or the scooter. You see the amount of...
I do. I have my Vespa. But somebody said Miami is behind the curve. I think you did that somehow in the infrastructure or so.
Well, I think what I said is the next phase of Miami is being, taking the infrastructure to a different level, increasing particularly with the rail, I think is important. I mean, the Bright Line's been great. I did business throughout the Tri-County area, throughout Florida. If I'm going to West Palm now, I won't drive anymore. I'll take the Bright Line, but we also got to figure out a way to get people from west to east a little easier. So.
But I consider even the Bright Line is behind the curve, because I would have expected that you have a train that's 160 miles an hour because we're building land. Now we are building a train that goes 80 miles an hour behind the curve.
Yeah.
The bridge here at Brickell.
It's a problem.
I remember 78, I remember Miami discussing the bridge here, tunnel. Now they cannot tunnel anymore. It's too late. So behind the curve.
Yeah.
Miami is infrastructure-wise behind the curve. And I know the city. I know the corridor, Miami corridor. I don't know what all this building means. New York, yes. That means New York, really, and that's what they want. But can they compete with New York? What is Miami? Miami has no industry. Has a lot of hospitals, tourism, whatever the port is a transit port. So look there, letters of credit, that's transit port. So what is here? And now you mentioned Atlanta. I know Alpharetta. I know Buckhead. I don't know what they are doing to get huge European companies, manufacturers into this town. Yeah.
Can I answer that one?
Tax credits.
I work for Brooklyn.
Yeah, but why it's
I have a-
Florida doesn't get
Well,
tax
Miami
credits?
has.
Go ahead.
Miami has something that we all have in this room because we kind of came from different places, most of us, and we built Miami into this passionate, cool place that it is. Everybody who is selling or buying here, they didn't come to Miami by accident. They saw something that sparked them and they thought, well, maybe I deserve that, right? Let me move to Miami, it looks fun on TV. So they come here, they work. Oh, I don't know if I want to. Okay, what I've noticed from bringing up Brickell in downtown and Key Biscayne on a regular basis, doing what I do, selling marketing and advertising for magazines, we've seen in the last 10 years, I remember when I came here from Chicago, I thought, oh, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, 12th market, okay, I guess it's not like the third market, Chicago, or New Yorkers might feel when they come here, or somebody from LA. But in the last 10 years, when I sit at the Intercon and I look out the window and I see your building and everything coming up, I feel a part of it. And that's what Miami has that a lot of the other cities don't have. They have a passion where people have come together from all around the world, found a way to work together, do business together, learn about different communities, all the things you've said. I've learned 20 things that I'm going to talk about this afternoon on the phone when I'm telling people why Brickell, downtown, and these areas are important. So that is the difference between Miami and some of the other cities I've seen, is that we're all here because we've chosen to be, we've left other places to do it. And so that's something we should all be telling people about when we're telling them why they should move here. With that?
Let me, go ahead.
I live in Brickell, and Lance invited me here actually. I work for Quest Workspaces, and I find that a lot of the companies, international companies, are coming to Brickell because they want to establish their business here and have another market. So they go to Quest Workspaces, say, hey, I'm starting my business here. I'm very successful where I come from, Colombia, Chile, Peru, wherever it might be. And then the one thing that I always have to speak to them about is the traffic. So they're like, how do you get around here? This is going to be a nightmare when I meet my clients. How's the public transportation? So that's the bridge, the Brickell Bridge. I have sent so many emails to people explaining the schedule, what they're doing, and how to get around. And it's a bit of an issue. So now we have people that are constantly in Brickell, for instance, not driving, thankfully. I walk everywhere. I grew up in New York, so I love Brickell so much because of that. I love the fact that I can go to any restaurant, any bar, anywhere, and I can just walk around and not have to get in the car. However, scooters, they're becoming a little bit of a nightmare in Brickell because everybody gets on those damn scooters. I have seen people in full suits, women, men, fall down, be on the sidewalk, and just crash into things and people. And I think it's getting a little bit out of control. And I'm just wondering, like, with that aspect, keeping that in mind, you guys are building such a beautiful city, and every building that goes up is so structurally gorgeous, and I'm always in awe, and I'm so happy to be here. But at the same time, I'm like, God, that's so much more traffic. How do we handle that? How do we talk to people from other countries that are coming here that ask us that? And they're like, wow, you guys keep building new buildings and more buildings and more buildings. How are you handling the traffic? So maybe you guys can give a little insight as to that.
Well, it's all relative, no? Have you been stopping traffic in New York? I'm from Mexico City.
Totally. And like I said, I'm from New York, so I get what you're saying. But at the same time, like, it's just I think we need to be, I guess what I'm saying is we need to be more conscious of that. Mm-hmm. And what Lance was saying, like the Parks and Recreation, and just more of a social aspect of it. Because there's a lot of people. Like you guys mentioned, these numbers, this seminar, this whole thing has been so insightful for me because I'm like, it's amazing the numbers that you guys are mentioning, 20.3 million people in Florida. I'm like, wow, it's just crazy.
Well, I think the reason why that, from my perspective at least, it's meaningful to continue that our development is in like a Brickell or in a downtown is because we already have the infrastructure there, as opposed to expanding the urban boundary and building in West Kendall and stuff. Because people here, as you build, the more nucleus people you have, the more opportunity you have to have supporting services for those people who live there. Retail, restaurants, gyms, bars, those kind of things. As a resident of Brickell with 3 kids, I can hop on the trolley, I could be at Brickell City Center. It's not that far to walk actually with 3 kids. You know, then you have things where you don't really need the car. So, whereas, when I first started working in Brickell in 2001, we'd almost take the car every day to go to lunch. Now we're lucky we take the car once a week to go to lunch, only because like we made the same 5 places a lot. But, you know, there's going to be more and more restaurants coming, and more as they develop, because they can support, kind of to John's question earlier, how do you support the high rents? Well, you put more people there, so they got more business, and they can make more money, and then they can pay more rent, right? It's kind of that's to me the way I see it.
That's in the next 10 years, that's what people are gonna see. You're gonna wanna just live, work and play, really, in that vicinity where you can,
I work and play in Brickell, don't
because
mean
of
Brickell.
time. Because of time. Our generation, I mean, I tell you right now that my daughter's conversation, I graduated from the University of Florida today, is very different from what I was saying when I was her age, right? I mean, she, you know, she's looking at, you know, she's in construction, but, you know, these kids are worried about how are people going to live in the future? How are we going to move in the future? This is the conversations that are happening between my 16 and my 22-year-old. So it's interesting to see. So for us, we may not be able to I am being in every day in and day out. I know that in 10, 15 years, that's where people are going to be concentrating more.
And I think it's you know, I think it's important to also keep in mind that Miami is a very young city, right? I mean, when you compare us to, and I never compare Miami to New York, because we're never, I don't think that that's the plan. Actually, the plan is for Miami to be Miami. And it's going to be very different from everywhere else. It's a very young city. We get the opportunity to craft the Miami that we want in the next 20, 30, and 40 years. And the solutions to the problems are not going to be the traditional solutions to the problems. You know, I mean, when you're looking at transportation and when you're talking about infrastructure, the difference that Uber, Lyft, and all of these things are making are significant, right? Where, I mean, I think Lance made a comment. You drive your car and you don't drive it again for, you know, for I don't know how long, right? I sometimes drive to the office, or I leave my car at the train station, and I Uber everywhere I need to go. So I think that the solutions are different. So we have to, you know, get out we have to look at the problem from a different perspective, and look at the solutions that are going to come in with the development of technology, you know, with the work, play, and live concepts that are coming into the city. I'm a huge believer in Miami. I am very bullish on the future of our city, and I think we have a reason to be the way we are. But anyway, thank you guys very much. I want to give our panelists a big round of applause. And thank you guys for joining us today.
There's still mimosas outside.
Sarah, because we already been in the